Hey everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today. You are here at DBT Core v1.11 Live. We have an amazing cast of speakers here today to go over, Core v1.11, the release, what we shipped, talk a little bit about the DBT roadmap, and then we'll have time at the end for some live Q&A with the team. We have folks from product, engineering, and our developer experience team. So very excited for this event today. Just some quick housekeeping, right? So we do have time for Q&A. There is a Q&A tab that you might see in like Goldcast here, right? So please drop your questions in the Q&A. If there's any questions that you're seeing and you're like, yeah, I want to hear more about that, be sure to upvote it. It'll help us kind of prioritize which questions we answer towards the end. There's also a chat window as well. So if you want to just get to know the other folks that are here today at the webinar, have some fun banter in there, share where you're from, and just kind of get to know each other. That's what the chat window is for. Etiquette, right? This is a community event, so just be kind. This is like an inclusive space, so yeah, just be kind to your fellow attendees, to the presenters, but definitely, ask questions and share your thoughts. We want to hear them. As far as the recording, we will be this is recorded, and we will be sending it out within 24 hours. So if you see there like one of the demos and you're like, I need to watch that again, don't worry, we will get the recording over to you so you can rewatch it over and over as much as your heart desires. And then finally, survey. We will be sharing a survey link at the end. So please just it'll take you less than a minute. We're always, interested to hear feedback on the content, right? Did you like what we talked about? Was there something missing that we should have been talking about? Definitely leave your feedback. It helps us kind of figure out and kind of craft future webinar content for you all. So let's see with that. Oh, yeah, DBT Summit. So we have our flagship conference happening this year in September in Las Vegas, formerly known as Coalesce, right? Maybe you've been there. Maybe you've even presented at the conference. Call for papers is now open. And I want to say registration also just opened today or this week. So scan the QR code, submit a proposal for your talk. It's an awesome experience. You get to meet so many amazing people in the DBT and broader data community. Agenda. So we'll have the presenters kind of jump in and talk a bit about Core v1.11, dig into some features, do some demos. Then we'll kind of pivot and go into the DBT Core roadmap. So what's happening for DBT Core and the DBT language overall. Then we'll spend about 15 minutes or so, maybe more, depending on how things go, on live Q&A. So again, drop your questions as the presenters are going over their topics, and kind of again upvote the questions you want to hear about. And then we also have an exciting giveaway today. So everyone in attendance here today has been entered into this raffle where you can, potentially win a DBT swag shop code to get some awesome DBT swag. And we'll do that at the end. And then we'll also kind of share some next steps around upcoming events, how to get involved with the DBT community, and all that good stuff. So cool. With that, I'm going to pass things along to our speakers that are here today. So I'll have them come up on stage.
All right. Hello, everyone. Can you see me all right? Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Grace Goheen. I am a product manager at DBT Labs, focused on all things open source, especially DBT Core. I've been at DBT for over 4 years now, and I'm super excited to dive in today to talk about the 1.11 release and a bit about the roadmap as well.
Hey everyone, I'm Zishan. I'm the engineering manager for the DBT Core team. I've been with DBT for just over a year now, but I've been a longtime DBT user since 2018, 2019, and so super excited to be here and discuss all of our new features with you.
Hi everyone, I'm Anders. I'm on developer experience. You might have seen my face. I spend too much time on LinkedIn and in our community Slack. And on GitHub. But maybe that's a good thing. So excited to share with you what's new and what's coming.
All right. So we are going to kick off today's webinar by first talking about the most recent 1.11 release of DBT Core. And I wanted to start this off by talking about a little tradition that we have on the core team where we name each of our minor releases after someone famous with ties to Philadelphia. This is because DBT Labs was first founded in Philadelphia, and it's just like a fun way for us to pay homage to the city where it all began. So we can't talk about 1.11 without talking about its namesake, which is Juan Torello, who's the first Hispanic judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit, also a four-time Summer Olympian who captained the Puerto Rico team, and the author of Global Intrigues. So I'll let you check out the 1.11 release page on GitHub if you want to read his full bio. Okay, so let's dive into what all is included in the 1.11 release. So I've got Zishan and Anders here who are going to go deeper into each of these features, show off some demos here. But just to kick us off with a little bit of a highlight reel here, 1.11 introduces kind of three big chunks of work. So number one is our big new language feature, which is out-of-the-box support for user-defined functions, or UDFs for short. That means that DBT can now manage your custom functions inside of your warehouse so that you can reuse that same version-controlled logic everywhere in your data ecosystem. Okay, number two, this category we're calling like stricter authoring experience. For those of you who have been longtime users of DBT, you'll know that historically, DBT has allowed you to kind of put pretty much whatever you want into your configuration files. And while we definitely want to continue supporting the extensibility of DBT, we also think it's important for the experience of writing DBT code to be more explicit and predictable. So we spent a lot of last year essentially codifying the DBT language into a set of strongly typed JSON schemas, talked a bit about, that essentially define what is valid DBT code. And starting in 1.11, DBT is now going to warn you by default when your project code does not align to the standard spec. And then finally, number three, we've also got a handful of improvements for specific adapters to improve the performance and reliability of your DBT projects. All right, we're going to get into all of these things, and I'm going to pass it over to Zishan to dive into UDF functionality and show us a demo of them working in action. But before I do that, we can't talk about the UDF feature without talking about the history of this feature. This is one of my favorite things to do because a lot of time DBT core features will bake over many years, and it's kind of this like journey of seeing it finally come to fruition. So the very first GitHub issue for UDFs was opened by our CEO, Tristan Handy, back in 2016. And then since then, our community has built some really impressive workarounds to try to extend DBT to tackle this use case. So I think Alice and Paul definitely deserve special shout outs for developing a PR and a full package for essentially defining UDFs as models in their DBT projects via a custom materialization. And these experiments were really helpful. They taught us all of the ways that this could work, and also kind of proved out the ways that a materialization wasn't quite the right solution for user-defined functions. So earlier last year, we opened up a GitHub discussion proposing UDFs as a net new node type in DBT. And we got lots of community members, maybe some of you are here today, who chimed in with their thoughts and use cases. I think this is like a fantastic example of the kind of community work that we love to see at DBT. Community members will experiment, they'll share out their solutions, and we really get to watch these feature requests bake over time until we reach this like final point where kind of understand what the tricky edge cases are. We know what works best. We understand what people need out of this feature. And then we feel like we're ready for that thing that's been discussed to graduate to become an official part of the DBT standard. And I'm very excited that user-defined functions got to do that graduation for our 1.11 release. So special shout out to all the community members who built these experiments, who took part in the GitHub discussion or the Zoom feedback session, everyone who contributed your thoughts and feedback to shape this feature. I'm really excited for you all to try it out. And I'll now give Zishan control to have him show you guys this feature in action.
Thanks, Grace. Yeah, so I think as Grace mentioned, we really wanted to do UDFs properly. And I think, having them as a dedicated node type and then materializing in the DAG with the right dependencies and in the right order is the way to do it. And as part of it, we also introduced a new function macro that allows you to easily look up the UDF and then call it. So I think maybe the best way is for me to just start sharing and then walk you through everything. Okay. So yeah, all our UDFs show up in the functions folder in your DBT project. And they are very similar to how you would define a model. So let's say I'm trying to define a UDF that takes a datetime object and adds any number of days I provide to it, and then returns another datetime object. So this is the SQL file for it. And then you would provide all the metadata for it in a schema.yaml file. What you have to note is that the add days is the name of the UDF that will be registered with the database, and then this has to match the name of the file. If the UDF has required arguments, then you have to provide them here. So, we provide a datetime of timestamp, we provide a number of days of type integer, and then we get a timestamp back. So you can build your UDF the same way you build your model. We see that it got registered. If we scroll back up, we can see that this is the actual contents of our UDF, and this is all the scaffolding that DBT is generating to register it in Postgres, which we're using for our demo. Now let's try using it in one of our projects. So this is the orders table from our beloved Jaffle shop. We have an ordered at column here. And then we want to set our estimated delivery date to be like 7 days after the order in general. So, this is how you call your UDF. You open your Jinja context, you call function, you call your name of the UDF, and then you close your Jinja context. This is important because this is actually, pulling up your UDF, and then in parentheses after that, you pass on your timestamp ordered at, and then the number of days that you want to add here. So let's go back and try building it. So we build the table as usual, and then we can use dbt show inline to look at the data. I'm not using the standard dbt show command because there's a lot of columns in this table, and so then things will get truncated. But you can see we have a couple of orders. You can see that our ordered at date is the 13th of October, and then the estimated delivery date is the 20th of October. So these are SQL UDFs. We had demoed these at DBT Summit/Coalesce last year. Since then, we have also introduced support for Python UDFs, which are very similar. So let's say, I recently moved from Canada to California, and I still think of the temperature as Celsius. So we have a Fahrenheit to Celsius UDF, and let's look at the schema.yaml file. So the name of the UDF is Fahrenheit to Celsius, which has to match the Python file name. And you can have any number of functions inside this Python file. So just to make it clear, I've called this function F2C. This function could call any other function that you want. All you need to do is tell DBT which is the entry point for your Python UDF, and then this is the function that we will register with the database, and that's where execution starts. And then you have to provide the runtime version. That is a requirement for both BigQuery and Snowflake. So this UDF, takes a temperature in Fahrenheit and return as a float, and then returns a temperature in Celsius as a float. So let's try using it. So, we have a sample model with a couple of cities with temperatures. We select the city, select the Fahrenheit temperature. Again, we call function with the name of the UDF here. We close our Jinja context, and then we pass in our parameters, and we store it as temperature Celsius. So I'm not gonna build this UDF because in Snowflake right now, it's taking a couple of seconds to register it, but I can build the table that uses the UDF. going to take about 4 or 5 seconds, maybe longer. I'm just going to run a show command in parallel while this runs. Okay, you can see that, a couple of cities, the temperature in Fahrenheit, the temperature in Celsius, and it's still running. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Anders to talk about the stricter validation.
Okay, everyone, let's talk about this. And it's kind of a lot to talk about. Let's start simple, right? We're talking about stricter validation. What does that mean? It's another term that's bandied about. You might have seen in some of our communication is about like authoring layer. So I thought we could start by defining some terms. Webster's dictionary, just kidding, I'm not that cringe. Authoring layer is a way to encapsulate what you think of when you're writing DBT. As you, as analytics engineers, when you're creating a model, .SQL file, which is basically a select statement with some Jinja in there, or you're documenting your model, or your DBT YAML, like the authoring layer of inputs of things that you change to modify the project, that's what we call the authoring layer. Included also in that bucket are also like the outputs, like when you call a DBT parse, what happens is DBT will spit out a manifest.json. When you call docs generate, we spit out a catalog.json. Like that also is kind of like in the scope of what the authoring layer is. It's like what you put into the box that is DBT and what comes out. And I think it's useful for the sake of this conversation and others. Like there's how you author it and then how it gets executed. Of course, as you might have heard last year, like we acquired a company, SDF Labs, who had like a Fusion engine. And our idea when we were going to market was like, oh, this will be simple. We'll just take the engine of Fusion and from SDF Labs and the authoring layer of DBT, and it's a drop-in replacement. I think this was a bit of an understatement as far as the work that was required because, there's different languages that are written. So it was a requirement that we had to sort of evolve our language and the DBT spec so that you could use them in both engines. However, this was also a great opportunity to address some of like really big paper cuts and pain points that users have had in DBT. Some of them I'll show you right now. Check this out. Somebody put in the chat if you've never misspelled a DBT config. I would love to meet you because I do it all the time. If someone feels brave to say like, oh, I've never misspelled all 13 letters of materialized or description, please let me know. I'd love to meet you. If you have a horror story, also let me know. One of the things when we went through this migration to the stricter validation experience was that we discovered in our internal DBT projects, there were things like description missing an I, or missing both I's, or misspelled things, or materialized equals table, but a misspelling. So it was actually a view for years, and we were unaware of it. And folks have been asking us for more than 5 years now. Here are some of these examples. Like, can we have some strictness here? And the answer was because we had never really taken we sort of had an organic evolution to what our authoring layer was. We had never been able to actually like validate that in a strict way. And, like this was like the silver lining to having to do a lot of the authoring layer like maturation to make sure that it works in Rust is that we could do this. And I'll show you kind of a little demo of that later. So like this for me is exciting because my soapbox always with like developer, as someone whose job title is developer experience, my soapbox has always been also as a former math teacher that like the best feedback is like specific and immediate and in the context of what you're doing, right? And so it's like not great when CI errors for a weird reason because you misspelled schema and the thing's not in the right place. Like you would love that feedback is most useful at the time that you're writing and authoring it at that time. So great, I think we have that. But with that comes some work. So let me just to reiterate the benefits of this authoring experience, right? One thing that you'll likely have noticed are some deprecation warnings being fired off. And if you've moved to Fusion, it's kind of a requirement that you address those. So just to be clear, like Core is backwards compatible towards the old authoring layer, but Fusion is not. It only supports the newer thing. But we expect this to be the spec for time immemorial. We're happy with where it's at. We don't anticipate any other changes. We have a great package, DBT autofix, I'll show you in a little bit, that shows you how to move that and safely migrate. And then last, another big benefit of this is performance. if we know exactly, if DBT knows exactly where to look in your YAML files, like we can more performantly read them, as opposed to like maybe there's arbitrary keys or things look a lot different from project to project. So with that, I'll stop sharing, and I want to show you a little bit of a demo. I want to show you two things just before I share my screen so that it's clear for me and for y'all. The first thing I want to show you is like that classic config misspelling. And the other thing I want to show you, like, how do these deprecation warnings show up and like what's the best way to resolve them? So with that, I hit the share screen button, and then I go and I share a tab that I call A Tale of Three Versions. You can see that at the top. Proud of that. So let's look here. Let me hit clear really quick. If you'll notice, if I do dbt-version, here I have 1.8. And I had to go back to 1.8 because we actually started introducing deprecation warnings in 1.9 and 1.10, as well as 1.11. So that's just like a clean old version. That's the old way of doing things. In the middle, I have 1.11, the newest version. And then here on the right, I have Fusion. So dbtf -- version. Great. So we're going to look at what this experience looks like between all of them. First, let's talk about the autofix problem. Well, actually, it's a little bit. It's hard as the versions. You'll see what I mean here. But first, I want to show you a model that's in here that has nothing special in it. This is just like a normal model in a project. There's no config at the top. But now I want to add I'm going to use a command line hack to add a config in there. And so now you can see if I go to the top, there's a config in here, but it's missing that last E. Happens to the best of us. I've been trying to make materialize be M13D for a long time, but people hate it. I know, Grace, you're not a fan, but too many letters, in my opinion. I wish it was shorter. But hey, it's misspelled. So what happens when I run the command, now that it's there? What happens when I run the command dbt parse? And parse is not necessarily a command that y'all, as dbt users in your day-to-day work, would be running. But just to say it really quickly, like parse looks at all of your SQL files and your YAML files, the authoring layer, and then like says, hey, can I read all this? Does this make sense? How are they connected? And then makes a manifest JSON. So when I call parse, like, hey, is there any problem here? Nope, no problems here. And then, yeah, let's go to like dbt, and we're going to see some deprecation warnings here that we can ignore. But let's go and add dbt parse on 1.11. And you'll notice like, hey, there's some stuff. Look at that. I got, hey, a warning, there's a custom key materialized. It thinks it's custom instead of a misspelling because it's hard for us to know that. But like this is already in 1.11. This is an improvement that you get. And so when you moved it, you might see some of these things. We'll talk about the rest of these later. But then just to show you this example, dbtf parse, you'll see that all of these are errors. So I just want you to understand that like in core, we're compatible with both authoring layers, like the old one and the new one. So as a result, we're only warning, and it'll be a while yet before we ever convert these to errors, if ever. But in Fusion, because it doesn't support the old authoring layer, it only supports the new one, like this is going to error right away. And arguably, this is a good thing. You know, like you shouldn't be said like, oh, by the way, this might be a problem later. Like my preference is to be told about it right away. Cool. So that's like the difference. This is an improvement in my opinion. The next thing that I want to show you is let's talk about some of those deprecation warnings that are here. So you'll see some of these ones here. They're saying missing arguments property in generic test deprecation. And you also see that same thing here. In Fusion, it's a little bit more specific. We get a specific span and like a column number and line number. But it's saying, hey, we need this new arguments, especially with a URL that you can click on. And let me show you just what that's about. So I'm going to do bat. And I want to look at the staging YAML file really quick. So if you notice, we have at the bottom these accepted values and values inside. In order for us to performantly and predictably read your files, we needed to introduce an argument so that it isn't just like arbitrary anything inside of here. Like arguments is a thing that's meant to be, this is used for the test. So the migration activity that needs to happen is it has to be accepted values, colon, and then indented is arguments, indented values. And that's what's happening right here in the errors that you see flagged. So how do we go about doing that? Like I can show you really quick. We have a tool called dbt autofix that you can run. dbt autofix deprecations, which is a pretty slick tool. And you've noticed that it's all moved. Like, hey, we found all this. We've moved all of these things under the right places. So now if I were to run bat again, we can look at this with the diff on it. Yeah, this is what I want. You can see that like, hey, where previously, these are all the things that we've added. So now there's an arguments in those accepted values. Great. Of course, because I'm on this 1.8 doesn't have the old authoring layer, if I call parse here, it's going to fail to parse. But let me show you what happens when I go here and I'm in 1.11, dbt parse. Yeah, all my messages are gone, right? And then I call here, I call dbtf parse, all the error messages are gone as well, and it runs. Cool. So I hope that I was able to explain to you like, hey, here's the benefits that we're getting in the stricter authoring layer. Also hopefully that you walk away understanding like why it is that we did it, its performance, its compatibility across programming languages and engines, and it's also just for user experience so that we may eventually show you exactly when things are wrong. And also that I hope you should walk away feeling like confident that like the dbt autofix tool addresses a lot of this like migration that's needed. We draw a lot of inspiration from like TypeScript's philosophy to say migrating from JavaScript to TypeScript, it might be tedious, but it shouldn't be easy. And so like with dbt autofix, with like the agentic, large language model coding agents, like this shouldn't be very painful. And if you find it is, let us know. But like that's all you need to know about for now. Thanks for letting me share about this.
All right, Zishan, you want to take it over to talk about some adapter stuff? I think you're on mute. There you go.
Sorry. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, adapters is something that, takes up a lot of our time and energy and focus under the hoods. There's a lot of like, networking improvements, stability improvements, things that we do with partners. I just want to call out one or two like, feature things that we have coming in this release. So, with Snowflake, you can have a better experience with like Iceberg table access to Glue Catalog. A list of all of these features, by the way, is on our release notes. Another interesting one with BigQuery is that if you're using like the model freshness feature, instead of fetching one source at a time, we can use a single aggregate query to fetch the freshness for all the models. So if you're running on a slightly large project, this can save you a lot of like runtime on metadata queries. And then we have like some new features with the PyHive connector on Spark. Yeah, that's all. I wanted to give a shout out to Colin and all the people on our adapters team. There's a lot of like under the hood work happening here. On to Grace to talk about the roadmap.
All right, awesome. So hopefully that gives you a picture of 1.11, which was our most recent release of dbt core. But before we move to the Q&A section, we want to spend a little bit of time talking about what's next for dbt core and the dbt language overall. In case you missed it, Anders kind of showed this well, but we have two engines now, right? So we've got dbt core and dbt fusion. And our intent is to continue to evolve that authoring layer, that dbt language across both of these engines together. So when I talk about roadmap stuff, you'll see these be delivered across both core and fusion. Okay, so I've got a at a glance slide here. We're going to dive into each of these individually, just like we did last time. But as just a quick summary to start us off, the things that we're currently working on include number one, Iceberg. Anders, I'm sure will speak well to this. This has been kind of a continued theme for the last couple of dbt releases, and it's just going to continue to be a theme in the coming one as well. There's a lot happening in the ecosystem here that we're really excited about, and making enhancements to dbt to kind of follow that path. The second category is, I guess, what I call like net new language features. So one that comes to mind that I'll dive into a bit more detail later, but we've been thinking about expanding source freshness checks to also run on your models. So being able to check the freshness of your models. And then we also really want to tackle some long-awaited upvoted paper cuts here. Third category would be building out dbt-specific skills for AI agents to do lots of different things like help me write a unit test or refactor my project. And right now we're thinking about looking at ways to bake those more directly into dbt. And then as always, final category here is all the improvements to make dbt more stable for all of our users. We did just post a new roadmap update to the DBT Core GitHub back in December. So if you want to read more on all of this, I would push you over to that place. It's also got a lot of musical theater references because I can't help myself. So hopefully you enjoy that. And then also keep an eye out for upcoming GitHub discussions for each of these things, where we'd love to get your feedback, hear from you, what you think these features should look like, how they should be built into DBT. Okay, let's start with Iceberg. Anders.
Okay, this is one I spent a lot of time, probably too much, thinking and talking about. But as a TLDR, I'm sure all of you have heard of Iceberg. It's very much the hot project specification in the data world. We're very excited about it here at DBT Labs. But with the caveat that there's been lots of really great support added across data platforms to read and write to Iceberg catalogs. Even though they're all doing it in a different order of operations and have different philosophies, we're seeing the industry coalesce on what does it mean for a data warehouse to read and write from an Iceberg catalog that might not be in that data platform. That's awesome. But it's also worth saying that it's a different skill set than analytics engineering to set up your data platform to read and write from an Iceberg catalog. You might consider that as a data platform engineering work. And so at DBT, we had to sit and really think hard about what is the opportunity for users of DBT to interact with Iceberg. There's maybe a future where we help facilitate creating your Iceberg catalogs and tables and doing your IAM permissions and stuff. But for the time being, we focused on the core user experience of an analytics engineer. So if you assume that, right, someone on your team has data platform engineering work and has set up a catalog integration, maybe it is you. The goal is sort of, how do we make it easy for an end user to just specify where something should go, right? So we've introduced this concept of a catalogs.yaml, where you sort of describe all the information that's encoded in a Snowflake catalog integration or a Databricks external location, so on and so forth, to the point that it's all abstracted there. And that a user hey, this table has to go here so the finance table can read it. As if you're an analytics engineer, you need only specify catalog at the top of your model. For me, I think this is really powerful, and it fits right in with the pattern of what DBT Core does best, in that we just abstract a lot of the boilerplate away from you, just as we abstract away the DDL and is it a create table? Is it create view? That's all abstracted away from you. A lot of that data warehouse specific, SQL. Same thing here. It's on Databricks, do you need to include use uniform equals true? And if it's Snowflake, are you going to say define some cluster by configs? All of that stuff we hope to abstract. So this has been iterating since 1.9, 1.10, 1.11. We're expanding its support. There was a discussion I opened almost 2 years ago now about maybe DBT external tables can adopt this pattern, or so you could read from sources. But stay tuned, there'll be a discussion coming out for this. And if you're interested, join us in the Slack channel for there's an Iceberg channel, Tools Iceberg. I think that's all I got.
Awesome. Okay, so second category here, catalogs would be existing language features that we want to continue evolving. But there's also net new features that we want to add. One of them that we've been talking about for some time now in a roadmap post is this idea of model freshness. So DBT Core has supported checking your source freshness since I think the 1.13 release, which was back in 2019. These are essentially checks on your source tables, which are tables that are updated and managed outside of DBT to help you understand how fresh is the data in a given table. And we want to extend that same idea to models, which is the tables and views that DBT does manage. And this gets a bit trickier because there could be multiple invocations of DBT running across different jobs or schedules or orchestrators. And there's been some popular packages that have tried to extend DBT data tests to try to answer this question. Maybe some of you have used DBT utils recency, or there's a DBT expectations one that's expect row values to have recent data. But we think that it might be time to expand freshness to include models too in DBT. The second category of things here are like smaller feature requests. We like to call these paper cuts, things that you guys have been upvoting that we want to take a crack at implementing for our next core release. So I took a few screenshots of some popular ones that we're taking a look at now, but these are things like being able to support Ginge extensions for your Markdown and SQL files, to support richer like syntax highlighting. It's also things like being able to define your project variables outside of your DBT project YAML file, so that you can then reference them within your DBT project YAML file. And third, allowing you to optionally run your downstream models even if an upstream parent has failed. That's been a use case that's come up for a lot of folks as well. If there's something in this category of like paper cut issues that exist out there that you care a whole lot about, please make sure to upvote on GitHub, add a comment, kind of explaining your use case. It really helps us prioritize this kind of work. All right, I'm sending it back over to Anders, I think, to talk about some stuff with agents and skills.
All right, yeah, next chat challenge, like show up in the chat if you have zero FOMO about all the things that every day are new about AI and LLMs and coding agents. Again, I would like to give you the key to DBT City if you feel like you don't have that. Things are moving really quickly. I've recently gotten way into it. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but I will say that it is a learning curve. Things change every day. And if you haven't had the opportunity to play with coding agents to do analytics engineering work, I cannot recommend it enough. Even if it's an experience to see here what they're missing. But one thing that we've noticed is that while large language models certainly understand your DBT project and the conventions and can look up docs, one thing that it's missing is sort of the higher order instructions. What does it mean to refactor a model? What does it mean to take a stored procedure and move it to DBT? What does it mean to write a unit test or to get data about, or know about lineage of your catalog? And so we launched an MCP server last year, but just a few weeks ago, we launched DBT agent skills. And this is sort of an encoding, the specialization of analytics engineering into some discrete tasks that are reusable between data teams, regardless of where you're working. So the idea is that you have a coding agent, that you give the context of what analytics engineering even is and the kind of work there is to be done. And then maybe, hey, you and your task or you're internally in your team, you also have a repository of knowledge about how things work for your particular team. And it's a hierarchy of all the context that you need. As far as what agents we've launched so far or skills we've launched so far, I've named some of them already, but you can see making a unit test, just doing DBT in general, fetching docs. There's lots of fun ones and more coming. So you should check it out if you haven't already. When it comes to, okay, but what does this mean for DBT core and what's on the roadmap? There's a lot of open conversation and maybe consolidation of standards and frameworks about how one installs skills generally for any coding agent. And so there's a plethora of options already that we're working to make sure are available to you as users. But hey, we already have something called DBT deps, and that's installing also best practices of packages from other places, from elsewhere in your company or in the broader data ecosystem. Why not have this capability inside of dependencies? So there'll be a discussion launching pretty soon where we'd love to get your feedback to say is this something that we should support? What would that look like? So that the purple people, as we like to call these medium technical analytics engineers, have access to these without needing to have NPM available in an environment to install. So look forward to that discussion, and I look forward to hearing from you on that.
Okay, I'll take over from Anders here. We've been, there's a lot of stuff happening in core. There's a lot of stuff happening in Fusion. Naturally, people will have questions around, hey, what features are in core? What features are in Fusion? And I think the way we think about it is not from that perspective. The way we think about it is that DBT at this point is a shared language spec that should work across both core and Fusion. So the way you look at core is a Python implementation of the spec that has been around for the last decade, and Fusion is a Rust implementation of the same spec. As new features get introduced, we will add them to both of the implementations. They might not land at exactly the same time, but the idea is that if it makes sense, unless there's a Rust specific thing, most features will land in one engine and then be translated over to the other engine very shortly after. The other important thing to note here is that as bug fixes get reported in, let's say, DBT core, we will implement the same bug fixes on the Fusion side of things and vice versa. So for most intents and purposes, people should expect their projects to be interchangeable between core and Fusion. The other thing that happened recently is we open sourced metric flow under the Apache 2.0 license, which means that with both core and metric flow being under the same license, we are able to bundle them together and offer more integrations right off the bat. So that's something the team has been considering, and you should hear about it more from us soon. Lastly, I think last year has been pretty volatile for the team in terms of us getting, pulled into both open source core things and Fusion things. And there has been this feeling from the community that, hey, we haven't been as up to date on issues or triaging things or responding to community, requests. So I just wanted to give a shout out to our new Bangalore office, our site leader, Trilok, and all of our new engineers. There's 7 people joining the core team out of India. This is the first team that we've set it up there. And their main focus is working on open source. So DBT core will now be developed out of San Francisco, Toronto, and Bangalore. Our hope is that we are able to respond to a lot of things faster, catch up on a lot of things that have been reported over the last 4 or 5 months, and just have a much better SLA for community engagement. With that, I'll hand over to Leah for Q&A.
I think Sarah's running our Q&A, so we'll pull her back up on stage.
Hey folks, I'm back. All right, so let's see. Let's stop sharing these screens. We have a lot of questions. I think let's start by maybe tackling the ones that are about UDFs. Let's see. I had all of these queued up, and there are so many now. Okay, perfect. First one. What are the benefits of using a UDF versus something like a macro in DBT?
Maybe I'll take that. I think the primary benefit is for you to be able to use a UDF not only in your DBT projects, but also across your reporting and other BI use cases in your analytics ecosystem. If you are using macros, your macro gets inlined into the SQL, and it's just only available inside your DBT project. So in a past life, I used to run one of our data teams. We had a lot of UDFs for experimentation and assignment of things of customers and projects to different experiments, and then we were using those UDFs. This is pre-UDF support in DBT, inside DBT, as well as using on our mode dashboards. There might be some performance considerations as well in terms of which database engine you're using and how the query planner treats a lot of inline SQL. But generally, if you're declaring the UDF upfront, you should be able to expect the query planner to leverage it better when your model actually references it.
Maybe.
Awesome. And go ahead.
Can I add one other thing here, Sarah? I would also call out that macros they exist only within the context of your DBT project, and it has to be written in SQL. Versus UDFs, we just added support for Python UDFs. I already know Peter's somewhere in the Q&A asking about JavaScript support, which is on our radar, and potentially many other languages as well. But UDF should be able to give you the flexibility to define logic that is maybe impossible or really challenging to write in SQL as well. So that's another use case for maybe when you would use a UDF instead of a macro.
Yeah, and would highly recommend folks to check out the FAQ doc that Grace posted. I know I learned a lot just from reading that breakdown between when to use a macro, when to use a UDF. Awesome. Another popular question: Do UDFs support table return types?
Okay, love this question. I can start off here. Not yet. The two types that we support today are scalar and aggregate, which is like a property of your UDF that you specify in YAML. But that when we added type as a property here, like the intention was for that to eventually expand to include UDTFs, user-defined table functions as well, that would return a table type. And I think someone actually just opened up a GitHub issue proposing a spec here, which I can find and put in the chat. I'd be really curious to hear if you have like ideas on what exactly the configuration for this should look like, because essentially you need to tell us like, okay, it's a table return type, and then also like these are the columns and these are the data types of the given columns to create the proper DDL to generate that UDF in your warehouse, or UDTF. So not today, but this is like something that we intentionally pushed out of scope for the initial release, but it's something that we want to tackle eventually. So I'll share that out, and if people have opinions on how it should look and feel like, I'd be curious to get feedback on that.
Awesome. A couple more UDF questions before we switch topics. Does the UDF build on every DBT execution, or only if the code changes?
It should only be executed when you execute it as part of the DAG, or if the dependency changes. So the UDF will be registered at startup, and then it will be reused every time you reference it in your DAG.
Awesome. Okay,
There's
one more question. Oh, go ahead, Grace.
Oh, sorry, I was the last one. The same like selector kind of thing applies here, where if you did like state modified, that would help you like identify what code has changed or not.
And then one last UDF question on whether or not they support unit testing, what that looks like.
Great question. I can take this
Yeah.
as well, although I'm talking a lot, so chime in. So the way that you can unit test UDFs today looks like testing a model that relies on a function. So in the demo that Zishan gave, like if you think about the you had the Celsius to Fahrenheit or Fahrenheit to Celsius, whichever way conversion, you could write a unit test on that model that validated that the data, given a set of like inputs, that you got the expected outputs from that. We don't currently have a way to directly unit test just a function without having that intermediary layer of the model. I think we felt like that worked pretty well for most use cases here, but it's not off the table. Like this is something we could do in the future if people want to open up issue.
Awesome. All right, let's switch over. We have a few questions related to Python support. I think this might end up skewing into Fusion territory a bit. Let me find where, hold on. How do I stop sharing? Okay. All right, so we'll start here. Fusion, yeah, anything in the roadmap for Fusion to be compatible with DBT projects that have Python models? I think Anders, you have an update here?
Yeah, there's a great newsletter that I write that I post to the DBT Fusion discussions page, as well as to LinkedIn. And in that latest edition from a week ago, we say like Python models are in preview. And what does that mean? It means that your Python model should run without issue on like the warehouses that Fusion supports today. And if you find a bug, let us know. But the limitation is really that Fusion is a compiler for SQL, and it understands SQL, and like it does not understand Python for that reason. So the limitation today that we still have work to do on, there's a discussion about something called a source schema cache, like how do users provide types in the same way that a UDF is done, so that what happens today is when you run a Python model in Fusion, you have static analysis on. As soon as it gets to the Python model, it turns it off, and also therefore like all downstreams are off. We're introducing another mode called baseline where that might not be necessary, but I think that's like the barrier. So it's like we could call Python models done, but we have like another pass at it. We'll like give it a better experience down the line. So please, my DMs are open on LinkedIn, and DBT Slack if you find that they aren't working. Like I feel like I've actually asked for a couple of feedback. Tell me where they aren't working. So if you've got some, I'm all ears.
Which kind of leads into this question, right? Does that extend to the VS Code extension, right? Can you work with Python models out of the VS Code extension?
Yeah, I think it's like the same story here, right? Like I think there's probably an opportunity, like there's lots of great language servers already for Python. DBT does not have a language server for Python. It only has one for SQL. So like to the extent that the VS Code extension today is only for Fusion, they work in Fusion, just as I've said, but what you won't see would be like the red squiggles of syntax highlighting at this time. However, like I haven't tried it myself, but I'm fairly certain that were you to install like a Python extension or use like Astral's new language server, that you would get those grammatical errors, but probably not with all the context surrounding it of the DBT project. Hopefully that's a good answer. If you want to open an issue to say like specifically what you're looking for, like, yeah, would love to engage with you there and talk more about it.
Awesome. This is a question around, is it possible to have autofix run on just one deprecation type at a time? Like,
it's a great question. Love to ask. I know we have, and Peter and I, Peter's given so much great feedback about Fusion and autofix in the authoring layer. We've certainly added more features, like there's a dry run feature that's great, but yeah, I think like Peter's point gets to sometimes, and the example that I showed was a toy example, and there were 7 things that were fixed. But like for folks who have models, like projects with models in the hundreds and maybe even thousands, like running that autofix can be quite overwhelming. And then looking at the resulting diff is like, there's a lot of changes. So I totally empathize with Peter's desire to be like, is there a way to more incrementally do this? And definitely willing to like have, if you want to open an issue on autofix, I'm happy to flag it to the engineers and like talk more with you about it.
all right. What else do we have here? Cool. Native private packages have been in beta for a while. Do we know if that is part of the roadmap to move out of beta soon?
Great question. I actually don't work. Sorry, me pausing to. I don't work on the part of the product that is our cloud offering, and I believe native private packages is something that's only available inside the DBT platform, which uses like your existing Git integration. I think there's part of this that also works with Fusion locally using your system's SSH configuration. Anders, I don't know if you know more about this.
I will have to admit that it's one of those times where I see it come up and my eyes glaze over, and I count myself lucky that I don't have a scenario like that, despite validating the feature is very much needed and useful. But I have some colleagues, like Doug, for example, comes to mind, who's like more in the loop on this. We can talk about. But I think like is the native private packages feature is like a platform, DBT platform feature, right? As opposed to core. So I don't know if that's not an answer yet, but like, maybe we can get back to you, Tina, if you want to reach out.
We can try to track you down.
You got us. Got him.
All right. I think we have time for one more question before we move on to the giveaway. So what is the future of DBT Core? Is 1.11 the last version?
Okay, great question. I saw this come up in the chat, and I meant last version as in like latest version in terms of like we put it out in December. No, there will be a 1.12. We already have a milestone in GitHub that is sort of tracking the issues that we want to work on for 1.12. So there's more to come. There's more to come across the language. So please continue to let us know which features you want to be included. And I would, again, direct you to the roadmap post in GitHub. We try to post DBT Core roadmaps every 6 months or so in the GitHub repository that sort of address like what we did in the last 6 months and kind of what we're looking forward to do in the next 6 months. Those aren't set in stone. It's a lot of like us kind of chatting, waxing poetic about the things that we think are interesting. But I would definitely direct you there to take a look at more things roadmap-wise.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. And like Grace said, keep the conversation going. Join us on like the community Slack. Join us on GitHub. Raise your questions. keep the convo going. But let's move on to the swag giveaway winners. I think we're gonna get some winners posted up here. Okay, yeah. Congrats, Santiago, Ramanathan, Claire, Lavender, and Thomas. You should all be receiving some type of code to go into the DBT swag shop and get something from the swag shop, right? Whether it's like a shirt or some coffee mug. There's a bunch of cool stuff there for y'all to check out. And again, thanks for tuning in. This has been great. Let's see. So that is the swag giveaway. One last slide. Cool. Few like call to actions, I guess, at the end here. Like we mentioned, join the community, get involved. The Slack community is fantastic. Folks are very responsive in GitHub. So those are just two places you can join us, and then keep tabs. Obviously, like we post like upgrade guides and docs and blog posts. So there's always like ways to kind of keep up with like what's happening with DBT Core. We do have an upcoming workshop March 3rd, 4th, all around like upgrading to DBT Fusion Engine, right? So if you have an existing core project and you want to kind of learn about what that process might look like to kind of handle those deprecations, to use something like DBT autofix, to play around with the new developer experience features that are in the VS Code extension for Fusion projects, feel free to sign up, and it's very hands-on. You'll kind of take it a sample project and get things migrated over from core to Fusion and see what that process looks like. Other than that, we have a survey link that's going to be dropped in the chat. Please, just if you have like a minute to give us feedback on this session, the content, and leave a note if there's something you want to see from us, right, for a future webinar. We're always happy to get that feedback from y'all. I think that's it. Anyone else? Any final words before we close for the day?
I just want to say thank you so much, everyone, for joining and for being funny in the chat and asking lots of great questions. It is great to. I wish I could see everyone's faces instead of speaking into the void.
I'm imagining the faces. They're great.
Yeah, I'm imagining them too. But if you have questions that didn't get answered, feel free to find me, Zishan Anders. We're lurking in the DBT Slack. You can open up issues in GitHub. Find a way to get in touch with us if you've got additional questions here, because we're always down to chat more about this stuff.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone.
It's trite to say, but we do this because we care about the community. That's why we're here today. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And like by showing up to the webinar, you're part of the community. If you have an idea, open an issue, share it around. Like we're more than happy to have this conversation. Like this isn't like you need to be opening PRs on DBT Core like to solve your own problems. Like the community is just showing up and being together so that we may learn from each other and talk about the future of analytics engineering. So for that, I appreciate y'all, and hopefully we can be in touch. Bye.